Okay, we're going to get started then. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Ann Carmichael, and I have been in the student financial aid business for quite a long time. I'm not going to tell you how many years. But if I don't have the answers to your questions, I'll be sure to find out and get back with you all. Now, if you have questions as I go through the presentation, you can use the Zoom chat box down at the bottom of your screen to ask those. And then afterwards, when we finish up, I'll be happy to answer them. Now, as I'm sure Mrs. Roberts has already told you, the Louisiana Department of Education asks that the class of 2021 submit the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA, as a requirement for graduation this year. And this just ensures that your money is ready and waiting for you when you begin college in the fall. College can be pricey, so it's time to start considering what those costs are and preparing for them. And they are going to include your equipment, books and supplies like your textbooks, perhaps a computer if you need one, your personal expenses, your phone bill, money to do your laundry. You're going to be an adult now, fuel for your car, and any purchases outside of your meal plan, room and board, which could be your dorm room or an apartment if you plan to live off campus, and tuition and fees. Now, when you're doing your research on the colleges that you're interested in, please know that their tuition might be listed on the website, but you need to take into consideration all of these other expenses. And the good news is that financial aid is available from the federal government, from our state government in the forms of the TOPS scholarship. Your college and career schools are going to have money available for you, perhaps, and then nonprofit and private organizations. But every year, the federal government provides more than $120 billion in federal student aid. And we want to make sure that you have your portion. Now, federal student aid includes the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Educational Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, federal work study, and direct subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans. So you can see that those monies add up. Federal student aid grants are a form of financial aid that does not have to be repaid. So you need to make sure that you are accepting all of the grant monies that you're offered. And these do include the Pell Grant for undergraduates with financial need, FSEOGs for undergraduates with exceptional financial need, service grants for students of military parents who died defending the country after 9/11, and teach grants for students who are planning to pursue a teaching career. Federal work study provides part-time jobs to help you pay for your college expenses. So when you tell the financial aid office that you're interested, they're going to consider you for this program. Any money you earn from working on campus is going to be paid directly to you to use to pay those miscellaneous expenses. Now, this is a FAFSA question. You're going to be asked if you're interested, and you can either answer yes, no, or I don't know. So we encourage all students to select yes if you're interested, because it doesn't obligate you to accept the positions, but it lets the financial aid office know to offer them to you. Now, this looks great on your professional resume. So you'll finish up your degree and then you'll have something of substance to put on that resume. Let's talk just a minute about these student loans. Now, you know that these are monies available for you to help pay your expenses, but only as needed. So only accept the portion that you need. Direct subsidized loans are based on financial need, and no interest is charged on these loans while you're in school. Direct unsubsidized loans are for everyone, but the interest is going to accrue on these loans and you're responsible for it while you're in school. So there is a big difference between direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And you always want to accept the subsidized portion first. And you can remember this when you get your financial aid offer by telling yourself the U in unsubsidized means that you always pay the interest on these loans. Now, if you are offered student loans, it's important to accept the federal student loans first because payments aren't due on these loans until you graduate or cease to attend. The interest rate is fixed and at a lower rate, and no credit check is required. On the other hand, private loans, you're going to find most require payments be made while you're still in school. The interest rate might be higher and it's often variable, and they almost always require a cosigner, which means you're going to be going to a parent or some other adult who already has established credit and asking them to be responsible for the repayment of your loan in case you can't repay it. So make sure you're doing your research. If you do, use a private lender because interest rates and incentives to borrow are going to vary. So you can see that everyone is eligible for some type of federal student aid. And all federal student aid and most institutional and private aid is contingent upon completion of the FAFSA, which launched on October 1st. And some of you may already have begun working on it, and that's great because financial aid is offered on a first come, first served basis. So you need to submit it as soon as possible because we've recently heard that more than 1 million FAFSAs have already been submitted for this upcoming academic year. You'll want to get to the head of that line while money is still available, so you'll be offered the maximum award that you're eligible to receive. Now remember that there are going to be deadlines. Your college is going to have a FAFSA deadline, the TOPS scholarship has a deadline, and federal student aid has deadlines. And I'm almost sure Mrs. Roberts has told you about perhaps a school deadline that you must meet to meet your graduation requirement. To make the FAFSA process go very smoothly and to cut down on the time that it takes to submit, be sure you're collecting all of the documents needed before you get started. And those are going to include the student and parents' Social Security cards, 2019 federal income tax returns if you filed them, and the W-2s because there's information on this form that might not be reported on your tax return. And then of course, bank statements and any records of investments because you're going to have to list those account balances as of the date you submit the FAFSA. But you want to get started by creating your federal student aid ID. This is what you're going to use to electronically sign your FAFSA. It consists of a unique username and password that you are going to create using your personal information. Each student and one of his parents should create this ID with their personal information. And it's important to remind you, seniors, that you need to use your personal email address when creating your FSA ID. because if you're using your school email address, that is going to be disabled once you graduate, and then federal student aid will not have any way to get in touch with you. Your FSA ID is legally binding, and it is your official electronic signature. So make sure that you are keeping this in a safe place, but recording it, because you're going to need it every year that you submit a FAFSA. If you don't have access to a computer, you can always download the FAFSA mobile app. It's called My Student Aid, and you can use it to submit your FAFSA on your mobile phone or any other device that has internet access. But if you prefer, you can use the web-based version at FAFSA.gov. Now, it's important to note that if you want to get started on your mobile app, you can do so there. And then by logging in with your FSA ID on the web-based version, everything will be combined into one FAFSA. The high school class of 2021 is going to need to complete the 2021-2022 FAFSA by logging in with the student's username and password. Now, the parent username and password is going to be used later if you choose to link to the IRS to grab your tax info and drop it into your FAFSA, and then to sign the student's FAFSA. So remember, to meet your graduation requirement, you do need to complete the 2021-22 FAFSA, because you're applying for financial aid for next academic year, the year you're going to be in college. There are 8 sections on the FAFSA that need to be submitted that need to be completed before you submit. And these include the student demographics, the school selection section, the dependency status section, the parent demographics, and then the parent and student financials. And then it's time to sign and submit the FAFSA. Now, as you move through the FAFSA, if you have a question about a question, you'll see a question mark over to the right-hand side of the field. You can always click there to get a more detailed description of what they're asking for. There are hyperlinks throughout the FAFSA itself that you can click on. You can contact Federal Student Aid if you need help, or you can call Leela's FAFSA helpline. And I'm going to give you all that information at the end of the presentation. But for today, I'm only going to be discussing some of the most commonly asked FAFSA questions. The citizenship requirement. The student does have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen to complete a FAFSA. However, if the parents are neither citizens nor eligible non-citizens, that student can submit a FAFSA. They'll just use zeros any place a parent social security number is asked for. Young men between the ages of 18 and 26 must be registered with Selective Service to receive federal student aid. So if you haven't already registered with Selective Service, young men, and you are interested in the federal student aid benefits, you do need to go ahead and get registered. You can do so within the FAFSA, and I've been told, well, I'm not 18 yet. I'll have to wait until I'm 18. But fortunately, you can register now. You can click the select yes on the FAFSA and say register me. And once you turn 18, you'll automatically be registered. Only the colleges that you list on your FAFSA are going to consider you for student financial aid. So add all of those schools. Even if you haven't applied there yet, go ahead and send them your FAFSA data. You can list up to 10 colleges at a time. And if you're planning to apply to more than 10 colleges, there are instructions to help you do that. Now, to determine your dependency status, in other words, whether you're a dependent student or an independent student in the eyes of FAFSA, you will have to answer yes to one of these questions, and I'll go over them quickly. Remember, they're asking these questions of the student. Will you be 24 or older by January 1st of the school year for which you're applying for financial aid? Are you married or separated but not divorced? Will you be working on a graduate degree? Do you have children who receive more than half of their support from you? Do you have dependents other than children who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? And it's important to note that boot camp and basic training is considered training. Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? At any time since you turned 13 were both of your parents deceased? Were you in foster care or were you a ward or a dependent of the court? Are you an emancipated minor or are you in legal guardianship? Now, it's important to note that emancipated minor and legal guardianship are two of those hyperlinks. So if you're not quite sure, if you fall into those categories, just click on those hyperlinks. Are you an unaccompanied youth who's homeless? Or are you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Now, if you have questions about these items, you are always welcome to give me a call on the FAFSA helpline and I'll help you work through those. But if you can answer yes to just one of these questions, you're considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes and you're not required to provide parental information. But if you can't answer one of these questions, you will have to get your parents' cooperation in completing your FAFSA. Now, if you're in a situation where you do pay your own, you claim yourself and file your own taxes, or you live on your own, but you can't answer one of the prior questions, you'll just need to go ahead and continue on. But contact the financial aid office because they might have some additional assistance for you. One of the most commonly asked questions that we receive is, who do I list as my parent on the FAFSA? And this is the rule of thumb. The parent or parents that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months should be listed on your FAFSA. Now, if you live with both of your biological parents, you'll list both of them. If you live with one of your parents, that is the parent that you've lived with the longest in the past 12 months. That is the parent who's going to be listed on your FAFSA. Now, if that parent is separated, divorced, or was never married, then you only have to list that one parent. But if that parent is remarried, then you're going to have to include her or his spouse. In other words, federal student aid wants to get an idea of the income of the household that the student has lived in the longest in the 12 months prior to submitting the FAFSA. Now, if you're considered a dependent student, say you couldn't answer one of the questions, those 10 dependency status questions, but your parents refuse to provide information on your FAFSA, you can go ahead and submit by stating that you're unable to provide information. However, you must contact the financial aid office because they can work with you individually. Remember that the financial aid office, not federal student aid, is going to award your financial aid. So you'll want to speak with them directly about your situation. Now, to make the process go more smoothly, If you filed a tax return in 2019, it's very important that you try to use the Internal Revenue Service's data retrieval tool. This is where you move from the FAFSA over into the Internal Revenue System and you automatically move your tax info into the FAFSA. It's going to make your financial aid process a lot simpler. And if you're having trouble doing that, give us a call. We have some tips for you. If you do choose to use that process, you'll be in the IRS site. And this is where your tax return is going to come in handy because you have to enter information exactly as it's provided and printed on your tax return. Then you're almost finished with your FAFSA and it's almost time to sign and submit. But please review your student aid report before you do so. This is where you'll see a list of all your FAFSA questions and your answers to those. And this is the time that you are able to go back in and make FAFSA corrections before you submit and send it over to the financial aid office. Because once it gets to the financial aid office, if you need to make an additional correction, you're going to have to log back into your FAFSA, make that correction, sign and submit again, and wait for the financial aid office to receive it. You're in the sign and submit section now. You'll see that the student and one of his parents needs to use that FSA ID that was created at the beginning of the process to sign the FAFSA. Once you do sign and submit, a confirmation page is going to pop up. Now, I'm going to encourage you to print this page or to do a screenshot of this page because although you're going to receive an email from federal student aid saying that you did submit your FAFSA, this is the only time you're going to get this much detail. You're going to notice that they're going to tell you on this confirmation page what's going to happen next, the next steps you need to take to complete the student financial aid process. You'll see the list of colleges that you are going to receive your FAFSA data, and you're going to see your financial aid estimates. And everybody gets excited when they see the dollar amounts. But keep in mind, these are only estimates that federal student aid is going to recommend to your colleges. The financial aid office is going to have to verify all your info, and they are going to be the ones who are going to send you your financial aid offer. Now, if you start a FAFSA or you submit it, say without signatures, you're going to receive communication from federal student aid that there's further action needed on your FAFSA. Then you can just log back in, take care of that, and submit your FAFSA once again. If your family's financial situation has changed since 2019, and we are going to see a lot of that, then you're going to want to contact your financial aid office and perhaps let them know that there's been an income reduction. Perhaps someone has been laid off in your family, or there have been some increased medical expenses that were unexpected, and they'll work with you and perhaps have some additional financial aid for you. But they're going to take your information and they're going to determine your net price. And they'll do this by looking at the cost of attendance on their campus, subtract any money they have available to offer you to go to their college, and that's what will become your net price. You can either pay this dollar amount out of pocket or accept student loans to pay the balance. Now, every college is going to send you a financial aid offer, and they don't all look like this, but they will all state their cost of attendance, and then they'll line item every grant, scholarship, student loan that they are going to offer you to go to their campus. This is where it's good to make sure you're applying to as many schools as you're interested in, because there could be money, more money available at one college than there is at another. So if you're trying to get through college without student loans or as few student loans as possible, you want to make sure that you have your options open. And you want to accept your financial aid in this order: all your grants and scholarships, because this is free money that doesn't have to be repaid. Next, the federal work study, because you've earned this money and it doesn't have to be paid back. And then lastly are the student loans. Be sure that you are accepting only the portion that you're offered. Now, sometimes on your award letter, you'll see a maximum amount of student loans that they have available to offer you. That doesn't mean that you should accept all of that. Do your math and only accept the portion you need to complete that one academic year. Now, Leela offers a FAFSA completion guide and workbook. It's free to Louisiana high school seniors. So if you haven't received a copy of it yet, um, you can send me an email and I'll be happy to include that, along with our senior checklist for college planning. Let's talk just a minute about scholarships. And I know Mrs. Roberts has spoken to you about this, and your parents probably have as well. But scholarships are gift aid that doesn't have to be repaid. They come from colleges, from your parents' employers, from community organizations and religious groups. They can be merit-based, awarded on academic achievement or some special talent or trait that you have. Others are based on financial need. A scholarship could cover the entire cost of your tuition, or it could be a one-time award of just a few $100s. But either way, it is worth applying for, because if you are awarded scholarships, this is going to reduce the cost of your education and your student loan debt as well. So make sure you're checking with Mrs. Roberts and contact your colleges, the admissions offices, and the financial aid offices to see if they have a list of scholarships that they know about and that students are receiving on their campus. This year, Leela offers 2 scholarship opportunities, and the first one is for all Louisiana high school seniors. If you complete your FAFSA and you go on our website and grab the application, you might win a $1,000 scholarship. If you have older siblings that are already in college, or when you graduate and start college in the fall, you can apply for our Choose Louisiana scholarship. And that's for students attending a Louisiana college. All of the details for both of these scholarships is on our website at leela.org. Now, if you find yourself at a pricier college and you do need some additional money after you've exhausted all of your free money and your federal loans, Leela does have a nonprofit education loan program, and you can find out more about that at leelachoice.org. Now is the time to ask your questions. If you want to ask something about material I've already covered, or if there's something that you want to talk about as far as financial aid goes, I'm going to encourage you to use the Zoom chat box, and I'll check it in just a minute. But I want to give you my contact information. As you're working through the process, or you're in your FAFSA and you have a question and you want to speak to me directly, you can call this FAFSA helpline, or you can email me. So go ahead and make a note of that while I pull up the chat box. If anybody wants to, if anybody has already started their FAFSA, I would love to hear from you. If anybody is working on college applications and they are being told that they need to go ahead and get that FAFSA submitted, I'd like to know which colleges those are, because I know they're ready and waiting to receive your info. And I'll give you just a minute. But I do want to let you know while we're waiting that a copy of this presentation is going to be posted on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to send it to Mrs. Roberts to distribute to you. And I don't see anything in our chat area, so I'm going to remind you to get that FAFSA submitted as soon as possible. Call me if you need me, and I want you to thank Mrs. Roberts for her assistance, because you think that this is a lot of information and it's very tedious for you to submit one FAFSA, but she is responsible for making sure that all seniors submit their FAFSA. So thank you very much. Okay, I do have one question. If the students are completing the 2021-2022 form, how will the 2020 fall semester? Let's see. If you're submitting the 2021-2022 form, that's for next fall and next spring, which actually is going to, believe it or not, going to be 2021-22. If you complete and you saw that you have an option to complete that 2020-2021 FAFSA, that's for students in college this year. So if you're graduating early and you're going to be needing financial aid during this academic year, then yes, you're going to have to submit both forms. But typically seniors graduating in May are going to be starting the 2021-2022 academic year. Okay. That was a great question. Anybody else?
Miss Ann.
Yes.
I was looking at the independent and dependent criteria, yes. But if I have an 18-year-old that is no longer under court-appointed guardianship, her mom is deceased, and she's now living with the grandmother. That's only one parent. So should she answer yes as well?
If she has a legal document saying that she has been in legal guardianship, and you're right, once they turn 18, they are no longer, they're considered adults, then she's going to be an independent student, and she will not provide any parent information, because although typically she's not actually still in guardianship, she has been, and they will accept that.
Good.
And that brings up a good point. No one other than a legal parent will provide their information on a student's FAFSA. So even if a student is living with an aunt, an uncle, a relative, or some students are living with siblings, those people will not be providing their financial or demographic information, except for those who might have legally adopted that student. So a student is either living with or reporting their biological parents' information, their adoptive parents' information, or no adult information. But you know, if you are a student or a parent and you're going through the process, there are a lot of resources out there. So give us a call if you're confused while you're working within the FAFSA, and I'll walk you through it. Okay, students, I hope you have a great year. Mrs. Roberts, thank you so much for everything that you do. And it was my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you guys.